Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cellular Healing TV. I'm your host, Meredith Dykstra, and this is episode 131. Today, of course, we have our resident cellular healing specialist, Dr. Pompa, on the line, and we are welcoming special guest, Sarica Cernohous. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
You got it. Thanks, Meredith.
That's great. Wonderful, wonderful. I know you and Dr. Pompa go back a long way, and we're so excited to finally have you on Cellular Healing TV for the first time, though. So Sarica is the fermentation queen. She knows a lot about fermentation, so we're going to really be delving into that today and have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk all about healing the gut and different ways to approach that with food and fermentation. But before we jump in, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Sarica. So Sarica Cernohous, LAC, MSTOM, and BSBA, is a nationally certified practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine and Chinese herbal medicine, practicing Japanese-style acupuncture. She's a CEU provider for the NANP through her program Fresh, Fun, and Flavorful in the Funky Kitchen, and is the author of The Funky Kitchen, One Soccer Mom's Favorite Traditional Food Techniques and Recipes. Sarica teaches on the importance and the practice of traditional food methods to both the public at large and other healthcare practitioners through her 6-week online course, Fresh, Fun, and Flavorful in the Funky Kitchen. She's also the co-founder of the teaching and wellness platform, The Belly Garden, a coach for the Metabolic Balance of Germany, and is a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation. She resides in northern Arizona with her husband and 2 children. You can learn more about her at her website, naturallylivingtoday.com. So welcome to Cellular Healing TV, Sarica.
Oh my gosh, it is so good to be here. It's wonderful. I can't wait for our talk.
Awesome.
I love her energy. I just get goosebumps every time. I'll be at a seminar, Sarica, and I hear the voice, and it's always bubbling with joy and laughter, always.
Oh, thanks.
You are the queen of fermentation, which we are such believers in on Cell TV. We are. We have doctors around the country, just fermenting and getting these bacteria and, doing this for leaky gut and food allergies, all these things, which is so needed today. I noticed you took off your crown because you are the queen. The crown is up there. You took it off for the show.
It's a little hot. A little too warm for the crown today.
Arizona, what's the temperature there?
Well, I'm in Flagstaff, so it's probably pretty similar to Park City. So yeah. I would say it's about 80 degrees today. It's very nice.
What's the elevation at Flagstaff?
7,000.
Yeah, so I'm about the same. I'm about right around 7,000. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always get the break, right? I mean, it's
yes,
always,
we do.
10 to 15 degrees cooler than probably more so from where Arizona is. I mean, what's it in Scottsdale? Or Phoenix? What's the temperature there today?
I flew in the other day and it was 113. And that's awful. I used to live in that.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's horrible.
My curiosity takes the show in different directions. People didn't come here to listen to us talk about the dang weather. They want to know about how do I fix my gut? What is all stuff about fermentation? I mean, we have people doing broth fasting and all types of different things, but fermentation is huge, right? I mean, we talk about how these unique bacteria that we really can get through fermentation, and it offers even so much more than that. More absorbable nutrition and digestibility for compromised digestion. So. Honestly, I always start everything like this. How in the world did you become the queen of fermentation? I mean, how did you start in all this? What's the story? There's got to be a story. I mean, you just didn't wake up one day and say, you know what?
No.
I'll become the queen of fermentation. And I'm going to write a book called The Funky Kitchen because it's funky because we have all these bacteria growing everywhere.
That's it.
It makes it funky, right?
It does.
You just decide that. We all have a story how we got here. What's your story?
Well, I think all of us who are in the natural health field, we probably had a little bit of an interest in how we could better take care of ourselves. I think that that's a little bit of the inroads anyway. So I think there was already an interest that I had intrinsically. Went on and studied traditional Chinese medicine, and that also got into a different view on nutrition, something that looked more at energetics and the way that different organ systems are impacted. So that already started to shift how I thought about nutrition. But then it was after schooling, and I was beginning to practice, and I was starting to run into some different health concerns. And so that makes you sort of stop and take pause. But the biggest thing that got my attention was when my son started really presenting with his own health issues. And so that's what really, moved the dial for me on this. And I read Jordan Rubin's book, The Maker's Diet. So that kind of went hand in hand with kind of this evolution.
Friend of ours. Yeah, Jordan's been a friend of ours for many, many years. I love Jordan. So.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, his book, The Maker's Diet, was transformative for me at that point in my life. And I know, that's why I mentioned that. I know you have a great connection with him. And so that was it. I decided to try my hand at making yogurt. And I thought, well, if people do this in Europe, like still today, then why can't I do it here in Arizona? And so at that time, there wasn't a ton of information online, so I kind of pieced together information, and that was my first foray into it. And it was a big, big, big leap of faith to say, I'm going to take milk and I'm going to add this powder to it, and then I'm going to put it into a warm container, not a refrigerator. I'm going to put it into a warm container, and then I'm going to eat that and feed it to my kids. And that really was such a big step into trusting the process.
Now here, you have it a little bit backwards. Let me tell you how I do it. I do all that, but I feed to my kids first. Oh, they seem all right. They seem like they're any stomach aches, anything like that. Okay,
the poor Pompa children, right?
They help me on this show for experimenting with my children. And by the way, Meredith, I Cell TV. Daniel's like, I got to come on your show because he has to bring a message. So they haven't heard from my kids in a while. So anyway,
I'll mark it down.
That is good. I've given Daniel acupuncture, and the last I saw that kiddo, he is getting so big. I mean, he is getting so big. Oh, it's good. You're doing the right thing there, clearly. But yeah, so it was yogurt. And then after that, it was just continuing to evolve into these other kitchen experiments. And really, after a while, you do kind of start looking like your kitchen is a laboratory. And you start thinking of it in those terms. But, it is so much fun because it is such an endless creative spirit when you start using these types of methods. And then with that, it's also so vitalizing. I mean, it makes you happier because your biome is happier, you're healthier, and you just have so much more to pull from. And so it encourages this kind of creative spirit as well because you've got the bandwidth.
I mean, and again, we could talk. Let's talk about the yogurts right now. The key yogurts, Let's talk about why it's different than taking a probiotic from the store. Let's talk about why it is, in fact, so healing for the gut, because it goes beyond even the bacteria. But also, you and Meredith, might want to have a conversation on how to make it. But that's in your book, right? Funky Kitchen.
It is. It is in my book. That's right.
You don't want to get lost in the details of how to make it. It is in the book by the Funky Kitchen. But if you guys want a conversation there,
it's on Amazon. Exactly. You're so right in that. I mean, probiotics are terrific help. I mean, sometimes it's the only thing that can work for somebody for the short term. It's for whatever the reason may be.
I like the word short term. I agree with you on the word short term. Anyways,
short term, on the short term. Or if you know that you're going to be traveling and don't have access to fermented foods. I mean, it's a great way to help keep you on track. It's going to probably introduce some species that you may not be eating, and that's good too. I mean, I'm all about variety here, and variety is really the thing that we do not want to create a monoculture in our belly garden. We want to have variety. And so it is that variety that when we eat a small amount of fermented foods and drink fermented beverages that allows us to pull upon what it is that our body needs and let pass through the things that we don't necessarily need.
We're missing this. I mean, this was something that our ancestors, I'm big into ancient healing, this is something that our ancestors just had to do because that's how they kept their food good, right? They didn't have the refrigeration. So we're missing this fermented food. I mean,
that's exactly it. And that is, you're exactly right. It's something that when you look at cultures all over the world, no matter, what their climate or environment, fermentation was exactly that. It was a preservation technique, whether it was, putting it down deep into the snow or figuring out how to do it down into earth-cooled, pods that would go, banana leaf wrap, that sort of thing. So whatever the media might be, it could be meat, it could be dairy, it could certainly be vegetable matter, plants, nuts, seeds. All of these, based off of what the common foods were for people, these could be fermented. And then that's important because that allows people to get through long periods where maybe in the winter time, we don't have a lot of fresh produce to pull from, back in the olden days, where in fact now, of course, we have refrigeration, we have things shipped to us from the other side of the globe, all of that. But it's been part of the evolution of humanity, and so it is something that our bodies are expecting. It is something that our DNA is looking for as part of this confluence of information that keeps us vital. And so when we do pull upon a small amount of fermented food and other pre-digestion techniques that I often lean on fermentation for these methods, these create a message back to our body at a cellular level that is wholly different than, taking a probiotic pill. Again, that's going to be good for the short term, going to be good for the times when we don't have access to fermented foods, but bringing in a small amount of this from, throughout the day is such a good thing to do. And one thing I want to say about that too is in the West, we have such a tendency to think that, oh, a little's good, a lot will be a whole lot better. And in the flavor profile of fermented foods, they taste the way they do, and to me that is an absolute clear signal that we only are to take a small amount at a given time. We're supposed to use it almost like a condiment, rather than what I see people do is they'll get, a 16-ounce container of kombucha, yeah, don't do that. Folks, don't do that. And down it. I mean, really, that should not be more than maybe a quarter cup serving that you might want to have at the beginning of a meal to kind of prime the pump for your hydrochloric acid in the stomach. And so it's very important that we just take it in little amounts throughout the day. So right, honor that. That's really important. Don't sit down to a salad bowl of sauerkraut.
Yeah, that's good for me because I don't like fermented vegetables that much. The sour taste gets me, so a little bit is actually better for me just from the taste standpoint. But I've learned also that I have a lot of bacteria. I don't do well with a lot anyway, right? So that works out both ways for me. I learned the hard way. Okay, so we started the conversation by talking about fermented dairy. And we kind of started also talking about fermented vegetables. What's the difference? What are some of the health benefits of this, the dairy versus the vegetables? And you have recipes for both in your book, of course.
I do, exactly. And the thing is what you're going to be starting with are going to be foods that have very different nutrition profiles. And so, I mean, we can look at a cup of milk and it's totally different than a stalk of celery. And so that's one really big difference right there. It's just what your foundational nutritional component's going to be. But one of the things that's so awesome and interesting about using fermentation methods is it actually changes the vitamin and sometimes the mineral structure of different foods. I mean, sometimes creating it out of thin air, which is amazing, seemingly out of thin air, but what it is it's a byproduct of the fermentation process, generally of the lactobacilli. And so so we can take a food that maybe, like milk, can be very, pretty much non-existent in naturally occurring folate, but when we go through a fermentation process on it, that releases folate. Same thing can happen when we are working with different types of root vegetables that way. And so that's really a wonderful, wonderful thing where it enhances this. One kind of really cool story is, Captain Cook, the pirate, or the sea master, I should say. He wasn't a pirate, or maybe he was a pirate. I don't know. He wasn't a pirate.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were talking about Captain Crunch. I had no idea.
I don't know that much history. I'm more concerned about the food aspect. So what Captain Cook did, no, he was not a pirate. he was finding that his semen were falling to scurvy. I mean, they were losing a lot of the population of the sea-worthy men after months and even years away at sea. And so what they started doing is they started tinkering with different nutritional components. And one of the things that they found some of the biggest inroads in was the sauerkraut. And so it was cabbage that had been fermented. And what happens when we ferment cabbage is it takes something that has a moderate amount of vitamin C naturally, and it actually turns it into a food that is very rich in vitamin C. Wow. And so it was something that allowed them to go on these long expeditions without damage, you know, in that regard. So pretty amazing stuff, this kind of alchemy that happens through the fermentation process.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. So you get a lot higher, and not just higher in certain nutrients, but really even more absorbable. I mean, how the process works, you know, with different enzymes that are there that weren't, like you said, eating it before meals is one way to even get more out of your existing meal. I just heard you say that in passing.
Yeah. Yeah, which is so wonderful. So I'll suggest that to folks. You know, if it's clear that, you know, that they're in a state of sympathetic override and they're just not letting down a proper amount of hydrochloric acid, and so when they do that, when we don't have enough HCl in there, that of course keeps us from being able to break down our minerals, and it keeps us from being able to cleave out the protein components, the amino acids, and the all of those pieces, the peptides. And so to help enhance that, one of the things we can do is to use a little sip of kombucha, or even a little bit of apple cider vinegar, or raw apple cider vinegar, or even a little bit of water kefir that's gone through a pretty good fermentation process, so it's not too sugary still. So any of those, or as you say, taking a couple bites of sauerkraut or eating a naturally fermented dill pickle, something like that can really help with releasing what is needed for us to break down the minerals and the proteins and act as a first line of defense against pathogens that enter our system through the stomach. So exactly, it has that effect as well, which is so fantastic.
I think for years people use the apple cider vinegar thing, right? Which, you know, for many things. I don't know. You just said that. You know, for the you know, stimulate the parietal cells and get that HCl moving and dropping. Okay, so what are some of these? Like, we have so many gut issues today, from leaky gut to you know, leaky gut driving autoimmune, dysbiosis, allergic to this food. You know, all these different gut issues.
Yes.
So how does this fermentation play into helping these people?
Well, we have to be careful. I want to say, again, I think what we see people do is they think that one thing is good, and so you know.
Sorry, my daughter just came back. I haven't seen her in forever.
Oh, say hi.
Interrupting Cell TV. Hi, welcome home.
Beautiful.
Yay!
Hi, how are you?
Ask the Pompa house, because you can hear the dogs haven't seen her forever, right?
Oh, they are so happy.
Oh, they have to take the celebration elsewhere. Oh, God.
That is.
I said to Meredith before the show got started that, oh, my daughter's, you know, coming home. She's been going to school in Spain and Italy, so I haven't seen her in forever, and she just.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. That is so cool. Oh, she looks awesome. Oh, yay, she's home.
Yeah, this is a special episode. This is a special episode.
Totally special episode.
But anyways, my dogs, how about that? They haven't seen her in forever, and when they haven't seen her in forever, they go nuts. They just
Okay. That is so wonderful.
I apologize. Where were we?
No, so what we were talking about, we were talking about gut issues and using ferments. And I was saying we need to be cautious when we do this, because, you know, folks didn't get to having such disrupted guts overnight. It might feel like it sometimes, but really, you know, what is it that we kind of say in the natural health field, that, you know, you're about 70% of your way into something before you notice a symptom. Yeah. And so, you know, folks have been leading up to, you know, their ookiness for a good long while by the time that they finally get there. And so we want to start low and slow with something like this. And the issue is also a lot of people, when they have this type of dysbiosis, they also can have a hard time clearing histamine. And
more and more of that today.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of it. And honestly, don't you just think people are so clogged up at the level of the liver and the cell membrane that it's like they cannot handle the most basic things. And so for us to come in and give a deluge of, long ferments, like a kombucha would be an example of that, long fermented sauerkraut, the aged cheeses and meats, that sort of thing. All of those are high histamine, and so that isn't going to work for someone like that. So in those instances,
and by the way, on this note, people are trying to get well by just complete avoidance. And look, we can avoid things while we're very sensitive for a short period of time, but if you're not upstream to what you just said, right? It is malfunctioning cells. It is a toxic liver. It is, that is what's driving, this whole thing. So, yeah.
It is. And so as practitioners, we've got to help folks in a cautious way. And as the patient, this person needs to know that they've got to go at this slowly with caution and don't just throw themselves to a boatload of ferments. I wouldn't, as I'd mentioned earlier, I wouldn't even suggest that for somebody who's really healthy. We're not designed to eat a ton of it. It's just a little bit all the time.
I love that.
Yeah, and so for these folks, I would suggest working with shorter ferments. So that would be like maybe a 24-hour yogurt. Actually yogurt only takes about 8 hours to culture, and so that's not going to be very high in histamine. Milk kefir is another one, and the thing that's cool about milk kefir is they've done some research around it, and they found that when people begin consuming a small amount of milk kefir, when they have had issue with being able to digest milk, the lactose or the casein or whatever, when they start using milk kefir, they actually can begin to attune themselves to being able to work with milk again. So that's pretty cool.
It has something to do with the DNA changing in the gut. We know that the gut bacteria communicate with our cells. And you said the fermented foods are what our DNA actually need and want and desire. I guarantee it has something to do with that communication. Right.
It's an epigenetic switch that happens.
No doubt.
It's exactly that. And, it's an interesting thing because I think folks think, well, this is fermented, so that's going to be kind of like that fermented thing and so on and so forth. But when we look at the research, there's different strains that are going to be in different fermented foods. And so milk kefir, even though a lot of people might kind of equate it with yogurt, they're very different. And they're quite different. And so milk kefir has a couple of strains naturally occurring in it that have a deeper impregnation into the gut wall, and so they're not a transient species like a lot of the lactobacilli, the acidophilus and bifidus can be. And so that's a pretty cool thing. I really like helping people work with that so that, exactly as you were saying, we can begin bringing more inclusion into the diet rather than, oh, you get to eat 4 things for the rest of your life. Because you and I both know, and Meredith too, if someone's only eating 4 things, they're not going to have a very long life, and it's sure not going to be too vital.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do some of the fermented vegetables come in? Do they one thing we know about these foods, that they have trillions of unique bacteria. So, different than, like I said, the probiotic. We have more, and we have greater variety. But how, do the vegetables give certain things better than the kefirs?
Well, the thing that I like about the veggies is that, again, you're going to be getting the nutrition profile of the veggies. And it's going to allow you also to use different types of herbs and spices that have their own epigenetic switches to them. So, for instance, I was just up at my sister's house in Eugene, and I want to mention to every person who ever wants to be on my mail list, my sister's now going to be doing recipes for every one of my newsletters. And Amy works from the traditional food preparation method background, but she's been a chef for 25 years. And so everything that I do, she does like 800 times better. It just tastes so good when Amy does it.
Meredith, everything I do, Meredith just does better.
Well, we all have to work together, right?
That's right. It takes a village. And so one of the things I do love about the veg is that, like, for instance, at Amy's house, she had made a really, really tasty, it was a kimchi, but she had made it with some fresh turmeric and ginger. And, I mean, the flavor profile on that was so off the charts. It was so good, so sublime. And it was one that I wanted to sit down and eat a salad bowl full of because it was that good. But what I see is, you know, the type of variety we're able to get when we work with vegetable ferments. And, of course, also the fiber that they have. That's another really big component as well. And so they're just a different critter. I mean, they're not going to have, you know, the protein that you're going to have with, of course, dairy-based ferments or that sort of thing.
Yeah. So how does this all, for my leaky gut folks out there, by adding, and this is what I hear you saying, add a little bit of the milk kefir, a little bit of the yogurt, add a little bit of the vegetables, right? You know, I mean, just a little bit of, because you're saying, hey, they're all different, and because of that, you know, I think that's great advice too, by the way. I think it's fantastic. So how does it, what about our leaky gut? How does it help our leaky gut person?
Well, you know, for me with leaky gut, it's not just about ferments. For me with leaky gut, it's also about, pre-digestion methods. So, you know, again, we can't have folks just eating, you know, the same 4 things. And so as we look to bring back, you know, other foods, you know, bringing in legumes. So I know a lot of people really can get some mileage out of eating basically just animal flesh foods and veggies. But that is not a long-term plan for people. And it's just, there's not a lot of joy in that. And so what you start seeing people do is they start tinkering with foods that they want to morph into the kind of food that they see everybody else eating and that they grew up with. And I say, no, don't do that. I mean, we are not designed to eat. I mean, I'm of Northern European descent. You are too, mid-European descent, and I'm sure Meredith is as well. And so for me to sit and plow through a lot of coconut flour from a genetic perspective just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, a little bit here and there is fine, but if I'm eating breads and pancakes and muffins that are made out of coconut flour all the time, which I see a lot of people doing, that is very challenging to the system. And we're just not designed to eat that much of it. So my answer is use pre-digestion methods that allow you to eat a full bounty of foods that are the actual kind of original foods, if you will, of what it is we're trying to fake and bake here. And so when I talk about pre-digestion, what I mean by that is just going to simple methods that break down different anti-nutrients that are naturally occurring in these foods.
That's right.
You know, and break down the carbohydrate structures that are there, and even cleave out the proteins into simpler to digest peptides and amino acids. And one of the simplest ways to do that is simply by soaking. Only soaking without even...
We say that. If you're going to eat grain, soak it and eat ancient grain. I believe that, you know, some grain and soaked in ancient grain is actually good for people. You know, some people, until they get to a certain point of health, you know, have to hold off on that. But once you're healthy, you know, hey, you know, that's what you're saying.
That's right. And you're exactly, I agree with you completely. You know, when someone is really compromised, starting them, you know, with like a broth fast, and then you come back away from that and you maybe start bringing in some fermented veg so that we re-inoculate. It's a slow and steady process, and you're in those early phases of healing. But for long-term vitality and somebody feeling comfortable, I mean, that's super important, that in their mind they feel comfortable with their lifestyle. They don't feel like, God, I don't get to do everything else that everyone else does. That's such a big deal. I mean, when we are stressed and we're in this sympathetic override pattern, what happens is that we're not allowing things to come in. We're in a closed off state at a cellular level. We are not allowing good nutrition to come in and toxicity to go out. So getting a person to relax in their skin with their food is really important. And so to me, that's foundational. And when we have this kind of inclusion, by just using simple techniques of soaking and, you know, maybe fermenting the grain, so that would be like sourdough is a ferment on grain. For instance, right now what I have going in the kitchen is I soaked and fermented pumpkin seeds and walnuts, and then I did some rye flour, and also I'm working with pinto beans out there right now. And so those are all things that are in different phases of pre-digestion.
When can I just buy them from you? I mean,
you're so funny.
I'm not going to do it. I'm just too busy of a guy. I mean, can't you just have your sister start making them?
I know. I've asked her.
I will buy them. I'll sell them on my website. I mean, you know.
Seriously, I'll let her know.
Hey, Sarica, I have a question too. How about for those who have a true dairy allergy or a gluten allergy? How do you handle that?
Well, in those instances, I think it is important to honor that. But like when we talk about this allergy thing that we were just mentioning with milk kefir, I mean, how many people, when they come back and they see that I've got a food sensitivity or some kind of IgG, you know, issue or whatever with dairy, how many people are told next, okay, well, I want you to start working with only a little bit of grass-fed milk kefir coming from raw milk. So, I mean, who is told that? Nobody is told to do that. No. And so if we can start bringing a little bit of this broader education and attempt, then I think we can start to make some inroads to actually being able to use these types of foods. And like I tell, like my metabolic balance patients or whomever, my regular patients, you know, the thing is that just try a little bit. Just a tiny bit. I mean, I'm talking 2 tablespoons tiny bit. Let's see how you do with it. And if that handles okay, then, you know, we can start to increase that a little bit. So to me, that's one response to that, rather than, oh, I'm just going to be suckling on, you know, almond milk for the rest of my life. So there's that. The other, though, about the gluten issue is there's research that shows that with a long fermentation cycle that those lactobacilli break down the gluten protein and cleave it out into peptides and amino acids that are not the problem that we see when people are eating gluten-bearing foods, especially what we have here in the United States.
Yeah.
And so that is a small inroad. Now, with that, though, Meredith, I mean, the thing that I do want to say about that is if a person, whether it's dairy or it's pork or it's gluten, I mean, there are all kinds of things that people kind of stay away from, and then they might look to bring back in. If they do that, they need to know that the body in its wisdom isn't going to just sit there and be waiting for years for more dairy to come down the chute. That's not going to happen. So we have to honor that there's going to be a small transition phase. At the very least, there's going to be a transition phase where there might be some disruption. It might feel real weird to us. And that's just the body saying, this is new information. Don't remember this. And so in those instances, it's a small amount. It's not part of a big complex meal. I see people making these huge complex meals and they've got, you know, total gut issues, and I'm like, well, yes, you do. There's way too much going on in that meal. I want deep nutrition, but it doesn't need to be a super complex meal, especially if you're bringing in something you haven't worked with for a long time. And in those instances also, it might not be a bad idea to even work with something like a supplemental bedding HCl, something like that, to help the body work with the digestion of that new food, and maybe some digestive enzymes.
Little apple cider vinegar right before the meal.
Yes, beforehand, exactly.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. Go ahead, Mary. What's that?
You think taking the apple cider vinegar is better than taking the betaine HCl supplement?
Oh, they're different. The betaine HCl is a much more potent acid than the hydrochloric acid. I'm sorry, than the apple cider vinegar is. But what the apple cider vinegar does is it really it's a cue. So when you take the betaine HCl as a capsule, it's not that you're tasting anything and you're getting a cue to your body to say, okay, put this down, start letting down HCl intrinsically within me, you know? Whereas when you taste something that is really tart that way, that does cause you to start letting down a little bit of hydrochloric acid. And so that's why, for instance, with my patients, if I'm having them take supplements that are in a caplet form and not in a capsule form, I will sometimes ask them to chew into it a little bit so that their body starts registering the energetic quality, the flavor profile of what those plants are in there, so that the body can start engaging already at that sensory level and start putting things to use that way.
Yeah, I've said this for a long time, right, Meredith? It's like, look, the key to fixing the gut today is ancient healing strategies. You know, we move people in and out what we call diet variation, the fasting, the intermittent fasting, and then, of course, fermentation has always been a big thing for me. It was one of my 3 F's to fixing the gut, right? And it was, you know, the fasting, the fermentation, and, you know, it's like these things are really the key. And it's, you know, a practice, obviously, that we've lost. It's a practice that someone like myself goes, I don't want to soak and ferment things. That's what. But your book goes through all this, right? It really does, you know. And
it does, and that's an important thing, and that's why I do the class with people too, because I mean, folks feel like it's going to be this big, overwhelming thing, and I mean, if I'm in a locale for more than 2 weeks, I am doing all these methods. If it's less than 2 weeks, there's a whole lot there that I'll just go try and get at the store, and you know, and it works out fine, because the thing is now with the vitality and the healing that I have done by doing this most of the time for me and for our family, when we, like I was just in Wisconsin this week, and while I was back there, I just kind of pulled stuff from the natural food store. And so, and some of it was stuff that I wouldn't necessarily even buy at home because it was what was available there, and it was the closest facsimile. And so, but the issue about that is that it wasn't an issue. I mean, I felt great during the trip because my body can handle that kind of bandwidth change. You know, it's like, woo, it's pushing me a little bit. Now I'm back home, and I'm, you know, getting back on track with the things that I do here. And you need to know, what I focused on, you know, in terms of doing the nuts and seeds and making the bread and making the beans and, you know, doing those things. I'm making some rice too. With all of that, that took me about 40 minutes to get it all set up. And then it's just kind of keeping tabs on it. It's like, okay, I smelled the nuts this morning and the seeds, and I could smell that they'd fermented enough, and I got them in the dehydrator before I started seeing patients. And so, you know, I mean, it's just like, bam, it's a small little thing that you have to do in the next phase, but then it's just hours in between where the fermentation and the soaking is doing its work. So it's not a lot of active part from me. Right. I just have to be aware.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You better send me something. You know, you're making.
I know.
Start it. I get all hungry. I wish I had a.
No, I'm getting hungry too.
Meredith's gonna like end the show. She'll be right at work. Watch this. You know, no doubt. You know, we have doctors around the country, you know, putting this stuff all together. You know, the fasting and doing these different things with the fermentation and how to re-inoculate after fasting with our cellular detox. You know, that's what we call a multi-therapeutic approach, you know, and we're training people in these approaches because this is a major, major epidemic of, you know, why people are getting sick, and, you know, the gut is a part of that. Well, Meredith, I know you have a ton of questions. I might as well just, you know, back up right here because you know, Meredith is the cook in the kitchen as well. She's got her own funky kitchen going down there.
Love it.
Not like Sarica's, but yeah. Well, I'm wondering, okay, so just clinically, when someone comes in and they have a lot of gut dysbiosis, a lot of issues, leaky gut, where do you start with them? What does it look like with diet? Maybe some other therapies you incorporate. What does it look like?
You know, the first and most important thing I do is I talk to them. And I say, I want you to tell me what your day looks like as soon as your feet hit the ground in the morning. And to me, that is so important. I want to know how they're structuring their day around food. Because a lot of people will say, well, I'm eating pretty well, you know, and that, of course, means different things to different people. But until I really have a very clear read on how their day is spaced around food, that I'm finding that is almost as important as the food itself. Well, maybe not almost, but it's a big component. It's really a big player. And so, you know, for instance, they're getting up and, you know, they're having, you know, coffee, you know, an hour or two before they have their breakfast. That's going to be doing very strange things to their blood sugar and their adrenal function for the rest of the day, and also their hunger signals. And so what I like to do is really back it up, see if we can get those people to have periods of, exactly as Dr. Pompa talks about, these periods of fasting throughout the day and overnight, of course, so that the person goes from being a carb burner to a sugar burner. I'm sorry, from a sugar burner to a carb burner.
It's interesting you mentioned the coffee. We always have our clients test their glucose after their coffee, because people are adding the fats and doing things. I said, yeah, but it still may not be good for you. You better fast so you know if it's what your body likes. So, it's different for different people. You better fast. So yeah, very good point. So.
Yeah, and that's such an important point. It really is. And of course it has to do with the person's clearance at the liver, if they're a slow metabolizer or fast metabolizer. And you learn that. If I have a person who really notices the difference by taking that cup of coffee into their mealtime, as opposed to what they did in the morning, where it was just on its own, and they notice they don't have that afternoon crash anymore, then we know that that person actually was very deeply affected by what they were doing there. And it was really important for us to bring nutrition into having the caffeine and slowing down the uptake of that into the system. So for me, that's like really important. I want to know what is going on in that person's day, and then I want to know what constitutes healthy or unhealthy, because even last week I had a new patient and she said, oh, I'm just doing my best to eat healthy, and so I'm not eating, I really don't eat much butter, and any person who knows me knows that I make fermented bread just so that it can be a vehicle for butter coming into my mouth. And so I mean, and the thing is I also like to really look at, that person's constitution. And I mean, I'm a Vata type, and Dr. Pompa, he's a Vata Pitta type, and Meredith, you're more of a Pitta type. And so for all of us, we can burn a little bit faster than someone who's more of a Kapha type. And a Kapha type is kind of a, a heavier, earthier person. And so for that person, I'm not saying they shouldn't eat butter, but they probably don't need as much as I do. And so we also have to look at that person's constitution, and so that's important as well. So I want to know what means unhealthy to them, and healthy. So that's very important. And then exactly, we might want to start looking at doing some testing for folks. I think that doing food sensitivity panels can be a good start. I'm not going to say that they're always the end-all every answer, but I do think it can give a good template, to work from. But for all my patients, I really, really work hard to help them make their meals nutritious but simple, but enough so that they have no problem going 5 hours between meals with only water in between. Because our body needs that time for rest and recovery of digestion. I mean, as we all know, anytime we eat, that's a big, big oxidative stress on our body.
Yeah. A lot of energy, especially when you don't have it.
Energy. It really is. And so to give that break, and what it also does is it allows our body to recognize the signals that say, okay, now I'm not dealing with, a lot of blood sugar here in the bloodstream, so I'm going to have to start pulling on my own glucose stores. I'm going to have to start pulling on my own fat stores, and that's where we begin to use what we have inherently within us, and that's where we go from being the sugar burner to the fat burner. And so, it's small little things this way, but I find that folks, bringing in the ferments, and again, if we see that a person, their face blows up and they get red and they feel yucky when they eat, like a sauerkraut or something, then we have a pretty good idea that histamine clearance might be an issue for that person. Yeah. So we have to look at the fine points of what each person needs, and also honoring what works for them in their life. And making it something that's doable for them so that they feel successful at the stage where they are, so that they begin to build their vitality, and they feel encouraged, and they want to then continue to step into more change, as they're ready to do so. And sometimes they need a little extra push. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to me, it is so multifactorial, and that's part of the joy of working with people this way, is helping to fine tune it with them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's great.
You mentioned the histamine, so it sounds like you're seeing a lot more histamine intolerance, and I know I've heard a lot about it lately too. How are you handling that?
Well, really, at the beginning, I am working with making sure people aren't bumping into foods that have a lot of histamine to begin with, and that generate that. So again, it's those long-aged ferments, it's the aged cheeses, the aged meats, those sorts of things. Those really lend themselves toward, that histamine let down in the body because they've got so much in them. I remember one time,
milk is much less, right? You were saying the milk is much less.
Yeah, for a short ferment. Exactly. So like an 8 to 12 hour ferment, that's going to be nominal compared to, I remember one time I opened up a can of anchovies, which I like anchovies very much, and I opened up a can of anchovies and I couldn't believe the histamine response that I got from it. And I don't think I really have like a major histamine issue, clearance issue, but there are some foods that even for those of us that don't really have that, they can really provoke. And so to me, Meredith, I think steering clear of those types of foods is very important. And then there are foods that we can eat, and I have a long list of it in the Funky Kitchen, of different foods that can be brought into the diet to help encourage and enhance our natural ability to break down histamine. And olive oil is one of them. Mangosteen, butterbur, these are some of those foods.
As we do cellular detox with people, do a lot of these other ancient healing things, and multiple different fasts. Eventually, they start eating it. But I love and they can, right? It's just we say working upstream, but I love the idea of starting with a smaller amount, right? You start with that fermented kefir. They can change that epigenome, which is again part of the problem. So.
Isn't that just so wonderful? It is. It's like the body just gets to a point where it says, I can't accept more right now. And so, it's like dealing with a crazy person. You've got to give them some space. Yeah. You've got to put them in a safe environment so they don't hurt themselves anymore, but you've got to give them some space. And so, yeah, exactly. If we come on with a ton of heavy therapies for someone who's so inflamed, it can be a little bit of a problem. Sometimes the slow and steady is the way we have to honor it.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah. And you just mentioned about transitioning from the sugar to fat burner. We talk about that a lot. And I don't know if you can both speak to this as far as the ketogenic diet and the impact that can have on the gut, whether that is positive or neutral or what you guys have seen clinically.
Well, me, I like moving in and out of it. I like just using it as a tool in and out, and what I call diet variation and changing, forcing the cell to the weak ones not to adapt. Bad cells don't adapt, and I think that's what you get with a lot of those dietary changes. But go ahead, Sarica, speak to it.
No, absolutely, and I think that that's the safest way as well. You get these people who go all ketogenic, and they stay there, and they begin to lose ground as they do so. In terms of the things that were working before are not working now. Our body likes stability, but it also needs the pressure of stress.
Yeah, I believe certain people they do better staying there, some of them, right? I mean, it depends on where their genetics are from, but most of us do good moving in and out of these phases, right?
That's exactly right. And to me, it feels right. If we look at how a woman functions compared to a man, we have a lot of fluctuation hormonally because of what we can do with our bodies. And so because of that, I think that women have a shorter window of where their body feels safe to do the things it needs to do in a right way. And a little bit of carbohydrate taken through the day, at these feeding times, if you will, or at least one or two of them, I think is a very beneficial thing for the signaling to a woman's hormonal system, so that her body says, okay, there's active and able nutrients. In Chinese medicine, we would call it nutrients that are good for spleen qi. So it's the earth element, it's the sense of feeling grounded, and the ability then to transform and transport and create new structures and energetic function within the body by way of knowing that, oh, I've got a little bit of carbohydrate I can work with. I don't need to be holding on tight and going into reserve the way that I see some women do when they're trying to stay in a ketogenic pattern for too long. Now, again, that's a generalization, but I would say on balance, I think that women do best with a little bit more carbohydrate in their diet than men do. unbalanced. And I think that it has a lot to do with our different hormonal system. So I think that ketogenics is a super cool thing. And I think it is something that we should be shifting back and forth in and out of. I mean, like today, you know, everything got, like Dr. Pompa had his thing, I had my family thing right beforehand. And so I inadvertently will be skipping lunch today. But you know what? It is so not a problem. Like, my body is fine. I could go out and take a long walk and it would not be a problem, and I probably will. And so I'll just get to dinner when I get to it. Now, I used to be a hypoglycemic mess. And I mean, had I thought about doing something like that maybe 10 years ago, oh my, it would not have been pretty. And so to now be a woman who is able to skip a meal if I need to, because I ate so nutrient dense at my first meal, and because my body knows how to pull on its reserves when needed. I mean, that's such a bonus. It's so good. It frees you up so much.
When you skip the lunch, if you looked at ketones, you'd actually start producing all these amazing, wonderful ketones that are healing for your body. You know, I found this little niche, you know, in the summertime I do a lot more endurance, right? And I'm always experimenting with different things. And I recover so much faster when I have more ketones. However, if I get more carbohydrates, in the morning I will not be in what we call ketosis. But by the afternoon, I start producing all these ketones because I don't eat, right? I intermittent fast. I let my body burn fat. So it's like I'm getting the benefit of both worlds, you know. And I really discovered, at least in the summertime, how good my body does with this phase. You know, I'm taking in probably, you know, it's hard for me. I mean, I say I always try to take in healthier carbohydrates. I probably take in between 75 and 100, and to hit 100 is a little more effort for me, just because of the foods I gravitate to. But still, even if when I do hit 100, I won't be in ketosis in the morning, but by the afternoon, I'm full-blown ketosis.
Isn't that wonderful?
It's a neat place to be when you see that, and I do that with a lot of my clients, right? I'll benefit from more carbohydrates, and then the intermittent fasting gives you the benefit of the ketones.
It does.
So it's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. And again, I call it diet variation. You know, and it really, it's amazing.
It is. It's such a good thing to do. And again, that's what our people did before us. You know, it just wasn't always so clear when the next meal was coming.
You know what, Sarica? I go through times where I'm just taking in very few carbohydrates, you know, and again, I'm still 50 or so, you know, under 50 or around 50, but I do that on purpose, you know, just to cause my cells to have to adapt. Strong ones adapt, weak ones, you know, do not adapt. But then I go through these times where I'm purposely trying to get more healthy carbohydrates. We're not talking about
For sure.
You know, but again, watching the amazing, you know, thing that happens in your body, even just that dietary switch. You gave us some really cool stuff. I mean, I think when we add in these fermented carbohydrates, I think just spectacular. I think our genetics, like you said, craves these types of carbohydrates. I think it's huge. I think people just going paleo are missing this. I mean, I really do.
I know. And it's a start. It's a start. And it's a doable start for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So, which is great. But it does not have legs for the long term.
Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree. Well, Meredith, any final questions? Oh, you had a final
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, well, thank you so much, Sarica. So many gems. And I don't know, I know as an acupuncturist, you probably maybe suggest some other therapies in addition to what you've already suggested with the food for gut healing. So I don't know if you had any other kind of suggestions you wanted to add in for those who are really looking to improve their gut health.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that. Acupuncture is phenomenal for helping people.
On that, Meredith. Bring her back on to do a show on that. I get questions on it all the time.
Oh, gosh. They just came up with the Sarica technique with Japanese acupuncture. I know.
Wow.
I know. And
the fermentation queen. Wow.
Sarica technique. It's a needle loading technique that I made up because I couldn't do it the way everybody else did, and I wasn't looking to show anyone, but I was at an event, and they said, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, this is what it is." So anyways, yeah, we can talk acupuncture.
Okay, we're going to do a show on that, and we're going to hold you to it now.
That'll be great. I love acupuncture because I'll tell you, I have a lot of clients that I will tend to work with from a distance who don't, they're not here in Flagstaff with me. And inevitably, I get to a point where I say, let me help you find an acupuncturist in your area, because we've gotten to this point, and I think that what's happening here is that the body is still in some degree of stress, that a good acupuncture treatment can help dial that down like nobody's business.
That's great. Yeah, no, we have a few of our docs who do this, Kristen Rotblatt and
yes,
and others. Yeah, Kristen and some others too. Yeah, but that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So acupuncture is wonderful. It's becoming way more widely available, which is great. And then I also, like just today, the patients I saw this morning, I recommend people do emotional freedom technique for their different stress points, and that's easy because you're working. EFT, good old EFT. I tend to send people to Gary Craig's site, but the thing I love about EFT is that it's free. And so it's something that folks can, step into no matter what the price point that they are. And then it's a little technique that they can use to really help them get through some very challenging experiences. So I love that. When people are in sympathetic override, of course, I'm also really suggesting that they start stepping into restorative yoga and meditation. And I like to give direction on that as well. So doyogawithme.com is a free website for yoga, and they have a lot of restorative classes, and I love that. Jan Boris's meditation book I love, and I direct people toward a lot of that. So these are all things that if we can get that person into a more receptive and safe place where their earth element feels nice and grounded and comfortable, then they are going to be able to take in the information of nutrition and all the other information that comes their way, and they're going to be able to process that better. And that's huge. So if we can get people to calm down, that's a big one.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you. That's awesome.
Good.
Thank you, Deb, as well. Thank you, Sarica. You're such a wealth of knowledge and clearly practice what you preach. So thank you so much for sharing today. And thank you, Dr. Pompa, as always. Awesome show. And we'll have you back. We'll delve into the world of acupuncture.
Love it.
Talked about it, we have not delved into it. So there's a lot there. And in Chinese medicine, a lot we can benefit from.
I'd love to.
Got it. See you guys.
All right, you guys take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
All right.